Friend, you won't believe what happened to me and Carol when we decided to spend a night at a motel. It was supposed to be a super calm night, but it turned into an experience that still gives me chills just thinking about it. It wasn't anything too planned, just an attempt to escape the routine. I thought it would be just another ordinary night, but I was completely wrong. Every detail of that night is etched in my memory like a never-ending nightmare. We had decided to do something different on a Thursday night, to relax and forget the stress of the week. You know how it is, that heavy work routine, problems and commitments that seem to never end. We chose a motel that seemed very quiet, with good reviews and a fair price. The place was nice, nothing too luxurious, but enough to provide a pleasant night. The room was cozy, everything set just right. A huge bed, soft lighting, it seemed perfect. Carol was excited, and so was I. The atmosphere seemed inviting, almost as if everything was planned for that night to be perfect. The room's decor was simple but charming. There were scented candles strategically placed around the bathtub and soft indirect lighting that created a cozy atmosphere. Carol even joked that we should take advantage of the romantic vibe, and I laughed, thinking the night would be memorable. Little did I know it would be, but in a completely different way. Around 11 p.m., while we were watching TV and talking about trivial things, we started hearing weird noises in the hallway. You know when you hear dragging footsteps, as if someone was standing right outside the door? At first I thought it was all in my head, maybe a guest returning to their room after a night out or something. But the noises continued, as if they were echoes of something or someone, and that's when the discomfort started to set in. I thought it might be an employee doing rounds, but as time passed, the sounds became more disturbing. Carol, always curious, went to peek through the peephole. She said there was no one outside, but the expression on her face gave away that she was also nervous. She came back into the room, laughing nervously, trying to joke about the situation, saying it was probably just an illusion. But deep down, we both knew something strange was happening. Around 11:30, the noise came back, this time louder and closer. It seemed to come from inside the room. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't. It was as if someone was walking around the bed, light steps, almost imperceptible, but clearly present. Carol was starting to lose her calm, and although I tried to stay composed, I could feel my heart racing. She tried to say it could be just some normal motel noise, but then the air conditioner turned off by itself. The silence in the room afterward was unsettling. I tried to turn the air back on, fiddled with the remote, the buttons, but nothing worked. The tension in the air was palpable, and when Carol came closer to help me, we heard a strange sound, almost like someone was breathing right next to us, but no one was there. The feeling that we weren't alone took over the room. We locked the door, turned off the TV, and stayed silent, trying to figure out what was going on. And as if things couldn't get more frightening, suddenly we heard a noise coming from the bathroom. Something was scratching the floor like a heavy object being dragged. Carol grabbed her phone's flashlight with a trembling hand and went to the bathroom. I followed her, heart pounding, and there it was. Scratch marks on the floor, as if something had been dragged. By this point we were completely terrified. We tried to calm our nerves, but the feeling that something supernatural was happening was undeniable. I started thinking about all those horror stories you hear about motels. Old haunted places where something terrible happened, and disturbed souls still roam the halls. Carol, despite being scared, tried to stay rational, saying it was probably just an electrical system problem, but deep down we both knew it was more than that. What made it worse was that despite the fear, leaving seemed worse than staying. What if we opened the door and came face to face with whatever was haunting us? Every time a little noise came from the room, our hearts raced. Carol suggested calling someone from reception, but at this time of night, it seemed impossible to get help quickly. That's when we heard a faint knock on the bathroom window, as if someone was outside. That was the last straw. Carol, now in tears, begged to leave. We grabbed our things in a desperate rush, and with the last bit of courage I had, I unlocked the door and we hurried out. The hallway was empty, but the feeling of being watched never left us until we crossed the parking lot and got into the car. We sped off as if something could catch up to us, and only when we were miles away did we start to breathe a bit easier. We spent the rest of the night wide awake, terrified of anything that moved. Sleep didn't come, and the tension only grew. As soon as the first rays of sunlight appeared, we left as fast as we could. We never went back to that place, and to this day, when someone mentions a motel, I remember that bizarre and chilling night. I can't even pass by motels without feeling a shiver down my spine. When I share this story with someone, it feels like it all happened yesterday. It's like I relive every second of the tension, the fear, and the discomfort we felt at that moment. Carol, even today, avoids talking much about it. But I know that every time motels or strange nighttime experiences are mentioned, she feels the same chill down her spine that I do. We never understood what really happened that night, but one thing is for sure, that was not normal. Something was wrong, something beyond our understanding, and I prefer not to find out what it was. Some stories simply should be left in the past. I have to tell you what happened to me and Felipe when we decided to take a walk in the park at night. It was supposed to be a calm, relaxing walk, but it turned into one of the scariest experiences of my life. We've always liked walking at night, the cooler air, the silence, but that night the silence had something different, something heavy. It was a Saturday, around 9:30 p.m. The park was near home, always quiet, with that sense of safety that makes you believe nothing bad could ever happen. At first, the scene seemed perfect. There were still a few people around, families heading home, couples on benches, children running around. But as time passed, the place started to empty out. Slowly, the park became deserted, and the feeling of loneliness began to weigh on us. That's when we passed by a more isolated part of the park, near some huge, eerie trees, and things started to get weird. This area was already kind of creepy by nature, with dim streetlights and neglected sections, with broken benches and overgrown grass. The place had a strange energy, like something was watching us. And then we heard laughter in the distance. At first we thought it was just someone having fun, but the sound seemed out of place. It was laughter that didn't match the silence around us. Right after, the sound of breaking bottles echoed through the park. The sharp noise was like a reality check, snapping us out of the trance that the calm walk had created. Felipe looked at me, and we decided it was time to leave. We started walking back, trying to stay calm, but before we could even get far, we saw three guys coming out from behind the trees. They were laughing loudly, but the way they walked, stumbling, made it clear that something was off. That feeling of being watched intensified when one of them shouted, "Hey, you guys!" We pretended not to hear and quickened our pace, but as we walked faster, they started following us, laughing louder and saying incoherent things. Felipe picked up the pace and I followed, trying not to panic, but the feeling that they were getting closer only grew stronger. The park, which had once been a place of tranquility, now felt like a maze of shadows and imminent danger. And then suddenly, the noise stopped. The silence returned, but this time it was oppressive. When we looked back, expecting to see the guys still following us, they were just gone, vanished, as if they had never been there. The park was enveloped in an almost supernatural silence, and the darkness seemed denser than before. That gave me chills. We ran to the gate without looking back again, and as soon as we crossed the exit, the feeling of relief was overwhelming. But when we looked back at the park, the place seemed different. The shadows seemed thicker, as if they were hiding something. Those figures had disappeared without a trace, and to this day, I wonder if what we saw was real, or just a product of our imagination. Since then, I've never gone back there at night, and just thinking about that experience sends a shiver down my spine. To this day, Felipe and I tried to find some logical explanation for what happened. We talked about the possibility that they were just some weird guys messing with us, but the way everything happened was too fast, too quiet. It didn't seem like normal people. The park, a place where we used to walk and feel safe, became a place I completely avoid. And when I pass by during the day, I can still feel that strange sensation that something is watching, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The following week, Felipe decided to go back in the morning, when the park would be full of people, just to try to understand better what had happened. He went back and said the place looked completely normal, full of children, families, like nothing strange could ever happen there. But he admitted that when he passed by the area where we encountered those guys, he felt that chill down his spine again. Since then, we've never dared to go back there at night. Some things just don't need to be discovered. You won't believe what happened to me and Leticia when we ended up getting locked inside a supermarket at night. It was supposed to be a quick stop, but it turned into one of the most bizarre and frightening situations of my life. I never imagined something like that could happen. But now every time I enter a market, I remember that day. We left work late, around 9 p.m., and decided to stop by the market to pick up a few things before heading home. It was one of those 24-hour markets, which always seems to be buzzing with people coming and going. But that night, the place was almost empty. The atmosphere was already a bit odd, with just a few people in the aisles and hardly any staff around. Leticia, always indecisive, wanted to check out all the promotions, and that ended up making us stay longer than necessary. Around 10 p.m. we started noticing that the lights were dimming, some access doors were being closed, and the market was giving clear signs that it was about to shut down, but we didn't realize it. We kept walking through the aisles until we reached the checkout and noticed there were no more cashiers. That's when the panic began to set in. We tried to leave through the main entrance, but the automatic doors were already locked. We called out for someone, but there was no one left. The market was deserted and the lights in several sections started turning off one by one. The silence was terrifying. The place that was usually full of movement now looked like an abandoned scene. The feeling that something was wrong was palpable. We walked through a few aisles, trying to find an exit or some employee who could help us, but it felt like we were completely alone. The feeling of being trapped there started to become suffocating. Every shadow seemed to hide something, and the heavy silence only intensified the sense that something bad was about to happen. It was past 11 p.m. when we heard a noise coming from the stockroom, way in the back. It sounded like someone was pushing something heavy, dragging boxes. We thought it might be an employee closing up, so we headed there to see if we could get help. I tried to stay calm, but Leticia was visibly scared. Her eyes were scanning the place, as if searching for any sign of danger. When we got to the stockroom, the noise suddenly stopped. There was no one there. The space was filled with products and stacked boxes. Everything seemed normal, but the feeling of unease was strong. The market, which had just seemed like an empty place, was now starting to feel scary with all that silence. Leticia suggested we try the emergency exit near the freezers. We went there, but the door was locked. I tried everything to open it, but it was completely sealed. And then we heard another noise, this time coming from the shopping cart area. It was the sound of metal clanging, loud enough to make us freeze for a moment. Panic started to take over. It didn't seem like someone was playing a prank. The noise was real, but no one appeared. The idea of being stuck there all night started to seriously frighten us. We tried to head back to the main entrance, and finally, as we approached the automatic doors, they slowly opened, almost like it was on purpose. Outside, the parking lot was empty, and the street was silent. We left without looking back, walking fast, our hearts racing. I don't know what was going on in there, or if anyone else was there besides us, but that night at the market stayed with me forever. Now every time I go shopping late at night, I remember that story and get that chill down my spine. What makes it even stranger is that in the following days, Leticia tried asking some people who also frequented that market about it, and no one reported anything unusual. That night seemed to have been one of a kind. One thing is for sure, we never set foot in that market again, and whenever I go to a supermarket, I make sure to leave well before closing time. That same week, I started avoiding any markets that stayed open late. The feeling of being trapped in such an ordinary place, only to see that setting turn into a nightmare, was enough to change my habits. Even now, I always make sure not to stay in closed places after a certain time. I don't know what caused all that night, but I definitely prefer not to find out.